What happens when a woman who thinks money can buy volume meets a judge who only listens to truth? Drop a comment telling us how long you think arrogance lasts in a courtroom. Because in exactly 10 seconds, Judge Caprio turned one smug laugh into the kind of silence nobody in Providence would ever forget. This was not one of those cases people forgot by lunch. This was the Tuesday morning case that made an entire courtroom lean forward at 9:12 a.m., stop breathing at 9:26, and walk out different by 10:03. Hit that subscribe button if you believe respect still matters, especially when someone has spent years acting like it doesn't. Because before this hearing was over, a white Range Rover, a wrist brace, a school zone surveillance clip, a body cam recording, and one handwritten letter would expose far more than a traffic violation. Like this video, if you believe the truth sounds different when it finally gets a microphone. And share this with someone who needs to see what happens when arrogance runs headfirst into patience, evidence, and a judge who has seen every excuse in the book. On October 14, 2025, in Providence Municipal Court, Courtroom 3B, case number PMC 25-11847 was called. The clerk, Angela DeLuca, read the name into the room with the flat professionalism of someone who had already handled 27 cases that morning. Vanessa Calloway. The woman who stood up wore a cream Burberry trench over a black silk blouse, pressed white slacks, and beige Christian Louboutin pumps that clicked against the courtroom floor with the same confidence she wore on her face. She was 39 years old, owner of a boutique home decor store on Wickenden Street called Ivory and Ash, mother of a 14-year-old daughter, driver of a 2023 white Range Rover autobiography, and according to the citation, responsible for one illegal stop in a school crosswalk, one act of disorderly conduct toward an officer, one failure to yield to a pedestrian, and one unsafe lane movement that led to property damage. But if you had looked only at her expression, you would have thought she was there to file a complaint, not answer one. She didn't look worried. She looked inconvenienced. Behind her sat three people who made that look harder to stomach. 72-year-old Martha Bell sat with both hands folded over a canvas handbag printed with faded blue daisies. Her right wrist was in a tan brace, and every time she shifted, her face tightened with the kind of pain older people often try to hide so they don't become someone else's burden. 2 seats away, Darnell Brooks, a 46-year-old school custodian from Cranston, kept his Yankees cap in his lap and his eyes on the floor. His gray 2011 Toyota Camry had been the car sideswiped during the incident. He was there because the repair estimate had cost more than 1 month of groceries for his household. And beside Officer Elena Ruiz sat a thin woman in navy scrubs named Patris Thompson, a pediatric respiratory nurse at Rhode Island Hospital. She was not in the original police report. She was there for a reason nobody expected when the case first got called. Judge Caprio looked down at the file, then over his glasses, then at Vanessa. Anyone who had watched him before knew that look. It wasn't anger. It was calibration. He had heard every tone people used when they thought they could charm a courtroom, dominate one, manipulate one, or perform for one. He knew the difference between fear dressed as confidence and entitlement dressed as innocence. Vanessa raised her chin before he even spoke. Your Honor, with respect, this whole thing is absurd. I was stopped for less than a minute, and somehow I'm being treated like a criminal because an officer had a bad morning. A low murmur moved through the gallery. Martha Bell lowered her eyes. Officer Ruiz did not move. Judge Caprio rested a hand on the bench. Good morning to you too, Ms. Calloway. A few people in the back smiled. Vanessa didn't. She nodded once, but it was the kind of nod that meant she had heard the words without accepting the correction. Judge Caprio glanced at the citation. You say you were stopped for less than a minute. The report says 2 minutes and 14 seconds in a marked school crosswalk in front of Nathaniel Green Elementary on Hope Street at 7:43 a.m. It also says you refused 3 directives to move your vehicle. Vanessa gave a small laugh. Not a nervous laugh. Not even a disbelieving laugh. It was the kind of laugh people use when they assume the facts will eventually bend around them. Your Honor, if every mother in Rhode Island got dragged into court for dropping something off in front of a school, this room would be full. The room was full. That was the problem. Judge Caprio looked at her for a beat longer than before. Were you dropping off a child? I was handling an emergency. What emergency? Vanessa crossed her arms. A private family matter. Her answer landed badly. You could feel it in the room. When someone asks the court for understanding while refusing to offer honesty, even the air changes. Judge Caprio turned to Officer Ruiz. Officer. Elena Ruiz stood. She was 33, neat bun, dark navy uniform, polished badge, notebook already open. Her voice was calm, almost boring, which made it stronger. At approximately 7:41 a.m., I observed a white Range Rover stationary in a no-stopping zone overlapping a painted crosswalk while students were arriving. Hazard lights were not on. The driver's side window was down. I instructed the driver to move. She waved me off. I instructed her again. She stated, quote, "I'll move when I'm finished, not when you chirp at me." A sharper murmur this time. Vanessa rolled her eyes so openly that even Angela DeLuca looked up from her papers. Officer Ruiz continued. At that point, Ms. Bell had already entered the crosswalk. She hesitated because the vehicle was blocking her path. A blue sedan behind the Range Rover tried to go around, and during that movement, contact was made with the rear passenger side of Mr. Brooks's vehicle. When I approached again, Ms. Calloway said, quote, "I pay more in taxes than your salary." That got a reaction. A hiss from somewhere behind the bar. A whisper. A tiny gasp. The kind of sound a room makes when it hears something ugly and recognizes it instantly. If you've ever seen someone expose who they really are in one sentence, you know that sound. Drop a comment telling us the exact moment you knew this case was about more than a parking ticket. Vanessa leaned forward. That is not what I said. Officer Ruiz didn't flinch. My body cam was active. That changed the temperature immediately. Vanessa's shoulders shifted. Not much. Just enough. Judge Caprio folded his hands. All right, we may get to that. But before he could continue, Darnell Brooks looked up for the first time. It was brief, but long enough to show what this had cost him. His eyes were red the way tired eyes get when a person has spent more time working than sleeping. Judge Caprio noticed. He always noticed. "Mr. Brooks, were you the owner of the Camry?" "Yes, Your Honor." "How much damage?" Darnell cleared his throat. Estimate was $2,386. Rear panel, bumper, paint, taillight housing. Insurance cover it. Deductibles $1,000. And did the other driver stop? Darnell turned just once toward Vanessa. No, sir. She stepped out for half a second, looked at it, said it was barely a scratch, then got back in. Vanessa snapped around. Because it was barely a scratch. Martha Bell visibly flinched at Vanessa's tone. That mattered. Sometimes what convicts a person in a courtroom is not only what they did outside it. It's whether they keep doing the same thing in front of everybody. Judge Caprio's voice stayed low. "Ms. Calloway, if you interrupt again, you'll help me understand your judgment even more clearly than the evidence will." That line landed. Not hard. Just clean. But Vanessa still didn't understand where the morning was going. She tucked a strand of highlighted blonde hair behind her ear and exhaled through her nose as if she were tolerating amateurs. If you had paused the scene there, plenty of viewers would have made the same prediction. Loud defendant, patient judge, guilty finding fine, next case. But that is not what happened. Because the first twist came less than 60 seconds later, and it changed everything. Angela DeLuca handed up a second file. Judge Caprio looked down, turned one page, then another. The courtroom could actually hear the paper. He looked back at Vanessa. "Ms. Calloway, were you also cited later that same morning at 8:19 a.m. for obstructing a hospital intake lane on Dudley Street?" The silence after that question was thick enough to feel. Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed. The room shifted. Officer Ruiz did not react, which meant she already knew. Patrice Thompson in the Navy scrubs looked down at her own hands. And Judge Caprio said the sentence that made every person in the gallery sit up straighter. So this wasn't one bad moment, was it? Vanessa's composure cracked for the first time, but only in the eyes. It wasn't like that. Judge Caprio's expression didn't change. "Then tell me exactly what it was like." She swallowed. And for the first time that morning, the woman who walked in acting taller than the room realized the room might be much larger than she thought. What she said next would decide whether this was just another citation hearing or the kind of courtroom moment millions would replay. Like this video, if you've ever seen a person realize too late that their attitude arrived before their honesty. Vanessa looked toward the back wall, then back to the bench. "I had my daughter's backpack in the car. I had medication in the front seat. I had to get somewhere quickly. Yes, I stopped where I shouldn't have, but people are acting like I ran somebody over." Arthur Bell drew in a short breath. There it was. The early outrage moment. Not because Vanessa literally said she hadn't done worse. Because she said it in front of people who had lived the consequences she was minimizing. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly. "Ms. Bell, were you struck by the vehicle?" Martha shook her head. "No, Your Honor." Vanessa let out the tiniest exhale of relief. Then Martha continued. "But when I stepped around the front, my foot caught the curb because I was looking at her bumper and the children behind me. I fell on my wrist." That relief disappeared. Judge Caprio nodded gently. "Did you receive medical treatment?" "Urgent care, sprain. They said if I'd landed different, maybe a fracture." "And are you the school crossing volunteer?" "Yes, sir, 9 years." 9 years. Rain, snow, hot days, icy mornings. The kind of person most drivers barely see unless she steps in front of them with a fluorescent vest and a raised palm. Judge Caprio thanked her. Vanessa pressed her lips together and stared ahead. But Patrice Thompson was still in that room, and her presence kept tugging at the edge of the story like a thread waiting to be pulled. Judge Caprio looked at the second file again. "Ms. Thompson, you're here relating to the second incident." She stood. She looked exhausted, the way hospital workers often do when sleep becomes a rumor. "Yes, Your Honor, I'm not law enforcement. I was asked to provide a statement because the vehicle identified in this school zone report matches the one that blocked pediatric intake later that morning." Vanessa turned to stare at her. "This is unbelievable." Patrice didn't even look back. A child with respiratory distress was arriving in a family van. The intake lane was partially blocked. Security had to redirect them. Delay was under 3 minutes, but with asthma, under 3 minutes can feel like forever. Now the room was quiet in a different way. Not judgment. Not yet. This was disbelief trying to decide whether it had heard correctly. Vanessa lifted both hands. "I had no idea. Nobody told me any of that." Judge Caprio's eyes sharpened. "Because you were parked illegally again." "It was for a minute." A minute has a different value depending on who needs it. That was quote number 1. And people felt it. Even Angela DeLuca stopped writing for half a second after he said it. Vanessa looked like she wanted to push back, but the logic was too simple to fight cleanly. She took a breath and went with indignation instead. "Your Honor, I'm being painted as some monster because I drive a nice car and don't stand here crying." That line sealed the mood against her. Because nobody had asked her to cry. They had asked her to tell the truth. And if you've ever watched someone confuse accountability with persecution, you already know where this was headed. Hit that subscribe button if you believe some people don't break down until the evidence gives them nowhere left to stand. Judge Caprio turned to Officer Ruiz. "Let's hear the body cam." The bailiff, Sergeant Paul Morty, stepped toward the monitor. And that was the moment the case stopped being about one person's version of events. Because once the screen lit up, the courtroom was about to hear her voice exactly as it had sounded on Hope Street at 7:43 that morning. No polishing. No editing. No courtroom smile. Just the raw tone of a person who thought the world would move because she asked loudly enough. The bodycam footage came on with a burst of static and the jittery motion only body cameras have, that uneven, chest-level perspective that makes everything feel immediate. You could hear school bus brakes exhale, sneakers squeak on pavement, a crossing whistle trilling in the distance, and Officer Ruiz's measured voice trying to keep order in the ordinary chaos of a school morning. Then the lens settled on the white Range Rover. It was stopped exactly where the report said it was. Front bumper over the painted ladder lines. Driver's window down. Engine running. Vanessa in oversized black Gucci sunglasses with one hand on her phone and the other resting lazily on the steering wheel like she was waiting in front of a spa, not blocking a crosswalk packed with children in backpacks. Officer Ruiz's recorded voice came through the speaker. "Ma'am, I need you to move the vehicle now." Vanessa, on tape, never looked up. "I'm literally grabbing one thing." "You're in the crosswalk, move the vehicle." Then came the line nobody in the courtroom forgot. "You people act like this is a murder scene." A wave of sound passed through the gallery. Not loud. Worse. It was the collective reaction of people hearing contempt in its natural voice. Judge Caprio didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The body cam continued. A little girl in a purple puffer jacket stood near Martha Bell and looked confused because the crosswalk she used every day was now partially blocked. Martha stepped around the SUV and extended an arm behind. Her to hold two children back. A blue sedan edged out from behind the Range Rover trying to get around the blockage. Someone honked once, not angrily, nervously. Officer Ruiz said, "Ma'am, put the phone down and move the car." Vanessa turned on camera then, annoyed, jaw tight. "I said I heard you. Stop talking to me like I'm 12. And then there it was. The line Officer Ruiz said she had used. "I pay more in taxes than your salary. Go direct traffic or whatever it is you do." The courtroom did not murmur that time. It went still. Utterly still. Because arrogance is one thing when reported. It's another thing when amplified through speakers, undeniable, cold, and perfectly timed. Sergeant Morty lowered the volume a touch, but nobody looked away. The footage shook again as Officer Ruiz moved. There was the sound of a shoe scraping curb. A child yelled, "Miss Martha," then a thud, then a sharp breath of pain. Martha Bell had fallen just out of frame. The little girl in purple started crying. And Vanessa, still seated in her SUV, said the line that would haunt her for the next hour. "Oh my God," dramatic. This time, someone in the back actually whispered, "Wow." Judge Caprio lifted a hand, and the room quieted. Vanessa's face had changed color. Not all at once, but enough. The practiced tan looked pale under the courtroom lights. Her mouth tightened, and she took off her sunglasses with a quick, jerky motion that said more than any denial could. "That sounds worse than it was," she said, voice lower now. Judge Caprio looked at her. "How fortunate for us that the camera does not require interpretation to know where your vehicle was and how you spoke." Quote number 2. The courtroom felt it. Vanessa shifted. "I was under pressure, I had a lot happening, I shouldn't have said those things." That was the first movement toward humility. Small, reluctant, but real enough to register. Then Darnell Brooks was sworn in. He rose with the stiffness of a man whose body spent too many hours lifting, scrubbing and fixing things other people never notice until they stop working. He wore a navy fleece with his school district logo on the left chest and kept wringing the brim of his cap between both hands. Judge Caprio softened his tone. "Mr. Brooks, tell me what happened." Darnell nodded. "I was in the line dropping off my niece, Kiara. She's in 4th grade. I saw the white SUV stopped where it shouldn't be. Everybody was backing up. I gave one little beep just to let folks know I was there." He glanced at Vanessa again, then away. She threw both hands up like I had offended her. Then this blue sedan tried to swing wide. I had nowhere to go because kids were crossing on the other side. Next thing I hear, crunch. My niece starts crying because she thought we hit somebody. His voice wavered at the last word. He cleared it and continued. "I got out. I looked at the damage. I said, 'Ma'am, can you just stay here so we can exchange information?' She looked at the panel, looked at me and said, 'This is why people need better insurance.'" Patrice Thompson shut her eyes. Martha Bell whispered something under her breath that sounded like a prayer, or maybe disbelief. Vanessa shook her head quickly. "That's not exactly." Judge Caprio lifted one finger. She stopped. Darnell swallowed. "Your Honor, I work 2 jobs, school custodial during the week, banquet cleanup on weekends. My son's braces started last month. My mother moved in with us after her stroke. $1,000 deductible is barely a scratch to my house." There it was again. The case widening. Not just a ticket. Not just a rude moment. Consequences ripple hardest through the lives already stretched thin. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks." Then he turned back to Vanessa. "Do you dispute his testimony?" Vanessa looked down at the table for the first time since walking in. "I dispute the wording." That answer got almost no sympathy. Because when people are describing the weight they carried, and you reply by correcting vocabulary, everybody hears the same thing. Judge Caprio turned one page in the file. "Your affidavit says you remained on scene until matters were under control." Officer Ruiz answered before Vanessa could. "That statement is false." The courtroom snapped to attention again. "Explain," said Judge Caprio. Officer Ruiz opened her notebook. At 7:46 and 12 seconds, the Range Rover pulled away while I was assisting Ms. Bell and directing children. I was unable to stop the vehicle immediately because pedestrian safety took priority. Vanessa's head came up. "Because you waved me on." "No, ma'am." "You did." "No, ma'am, the video shows otherwise." Another twist. And this one mattered because it wasn't about tone anymore. It was about whether Vanessa had submitted a false written statement to the court. Judge Caprio's voice got even quieter, and people who know courtrooms know that's when you should start worrying. "Ms. Calloway, do you understand that when you sign an affidavit for this court, you are certifying the truth of what you say?" Vanessa licked her lips. "Yes." "Then we'll be very careful here." He nodded to Sergeant Morty. "Continue the footage." The screen resumed. You could see Martha Bell on the sidewalk now, holding her wrist, children bunching around 2 other adults trying to help. Darnell stood near his Camry with both palms out, speaking toward the Range Rover. Vanessa's brake lights flashed. Her front wheels turned. Officer Ruiz was not waving her through. She was bent toward Martha Bell. Then the white SUV rolled away. No confusion. No permission. Just departure. The whole room saw it together. Everyone in that courtroom knew the case had changed. And when an entire room reaches the same conclusion at the same moment, that collective recognition hits harder than any speech. Share this with someone who still thinks the truth always needs shouting to win. Vanessa's jaw trembled once before she forced it still. Judge Caprio removed his glasses and set them down. I want to ask you a direct question. Not your lawyer's version, not your irritation, not your explanation 5 minutes from now. Right now. Did you leave that scene knowing there had been a fall and a collision? Vanessa stared at the bench. The answer took too long. Yes, she finally said. Martha Bell closed her eyes. Darnell looked away again. And just like that, the woman who came in acting overcharged admitted the single fact that made every person in that room see her differently. But it still was not the biggest reveal of the day. Because while everyone was still processing that admission, Angela DeLuca rose and carried a small manila envelope to the bench. Your Honor, she said quietly, the school submitted supplemental surveillance. Judge Caprio looked at the envelope, then at Vanessa, from the front entrance camera. Angela nodded. Vanessa's shoulders dropped half an inch. The gallery shifted forward like one body. Because body cam footage had already hurt her badly. If school surveillance offered a wider angle, there might be nowhere left to hide. Like this video, if you believe there's always that one piece of evidence people pray never gets played. The school surveillance video was clearer than anyone expected. It came from a camera mounted above the front steps of Nathaniel Green Elementary, angled down toward the crosswalk and curb lane. No shaking, no motion blur, just a hard, neutral view of exactly what had happened at 7:43 a.m. beneath a gray Rhode Island sky. The timestamp glowed in the corner. 7:43:08. Children streamed in lines. Parents waved. A crossing sign blinked amber. Then Vanessa's Range Rover slid into frame and stopped with the confidence of someone who assumed rules were for slower people. From that height, you could see what the body cam only suggested. Her vehicle didn't merely inconvenience a crossing. It split it. Martha Bell stepped into the road with 2 students and had to angle them around the front of the SUV, exposing them to the open lane longer than necessary. Darnell's Camry stopped behind the blockage. The blue sedan edged left, misjudged distance, and clipped his rear panel. Then came the moment that changed the emotional center of the case. A little boy, maybe 7, wearing a red Spider-Man backpack, froze in the middle of the crosswalk because the adults around him were suddenly moving in conflicting directions. Martha turned back for him. That is when her toe caught the curb edge and she fell. Her body twisted sharply. Her wrist hit first. The boy screamed. And every person in the room heard that scream through the courtroom speakers. It was thin, high, frightened, immediate. The sound a child makes when the world stops being predictable for one terrible second. Vanessa watched herself on the monitor and put her hand over her mouth. Not because she was trying to hide emotion. Because for the first time, she was seeing the scene from outside herself. That is often the real punishment. Not the fine. Not the embarrassment. The forced perspective. The awful discovery that your small behavior became a giant moment in somebody else's memory. Judge Caprio didn't interrupt the clip. He let it run all the way through. You saw Darnell step from his car. You saw him point at the damage. You saw Martha sitting up on the curb while another parent crouched beside her. You saw Officer Ruiz managing too many things at once. You saw Vanessa step out in her cream trench coat, look at the bumper, say something sharp no one could hear from that angle, then get back in. And then the SUV pulled away. One of the mothers on screen shook her head in disbelief, so dramatically that even without audio, you knew exactly what she was thinking. Patrice Thompson wiped under one eye. Sergeant Morty froze the frame where Martha sat on the curb, the red backpack boy gripping her fluorescent vest with both hands. The courtroom went silent. This was the shock moment. Not loud, not theatrical, just the kind of silence that settles when denial loses its last useful angle. Judge Caprio turned toward Vanessa. Do you still maintain this was being exaggerated? Vanessa's voice came out rougher now. I didn't see the little boy. Martha Bell answered before the judge could. That was Tyler Mendes, second grade. He cried the whole morning. Vanessa's eyes closed. It was one of those tiny involuntary reactions cameras love, because viewers know they're real. Not polished. Not planned. Real. Judge Caprio rested back in his chair. That child remembers your vehicle. Mr. Brooks remembers the cost. Ms. Bell remembers the fall. Officer Ruiz remembers your contempt. And this court now has a clear record. So help me understand what exactly you think is unfair. Vanessa looked like she wanted to defend herself and apologize at the same time, which is a miserable place to be because both instincts sabotage the other. I was wrong to stop there, she said carefully. I was wrong to say those things, but I'm not this villain everyone wants. I was dealing with something serious. Judge Caprio's eyes remained on her. Then why didn't you say that first? No answer. Because sometimes the truth is not hard to say. It's hard to say after you've spent 20 minutes protecting your pride. Then came another turn nobody expected. Patrice Thompson stood up again, unprompted. Your Honor, may I clarify something? Judge Caprio nodded. The child at the hospital intake lane wasn't mine. He was a patient named Malik, 8 years old. We had a note from intake because his mother filed a complaint. Security identified the plate from a still photo. Same vehicle, same driver. She took a breath. I don't think Ms. Calloway understood what that delay felt like to them, but his mother wrote a statement. Angela DeLuca handed that statement up next. Another page. Another voice. Another victim. This was how the narrative deepened past simple schadenfreude. Because now the courtroom was dealing with layered harm. Not catastrophic harm. Human harm. The kind people cause all the time when they decide their urgency outranks everybody else. Judge Caprio read for a moment, then looked up. Mrs. Nia Thompson writes that her son was in the back seat, turning gray around the lips and asking why they weren't moving. Vanessa stared at the bench in horror. Oh my God. Patrice's voice softened. He's okay now. That should have relieved the room. Instead, it made the negligence feel even more avoidable. Judge Caprio continued reading. She writes, I remember hitting the horn and seeing a white SUV in the intake lane. I remember thinking, whoever is in that car has no idea what panic looks like inside another car. That line landed like a hammer, because it was true far beyond the hospital. The school. The crosswalk. The collision. The officer. The whole case was turning on the same invisible sin. Vanessa had lived inside her own stress so completely that everyone else had become scenery. If you're still watching, drop a comment telling us whether a person should be judged more by what they meant to do or by what they actually caused. Vanessa pressed both palms against the table as if steadying herself. I did not know there was a sick child. I swear to God. Judge Caprio nodded once. I believe you. That surprised everyone. Vanessa blinked up. He continued, but not knowing because you chose the wrong place to stop is not the same as being blameless. Quote number 3. Simple. Unforgettable. Officer Ruiz added one final detail that hit even harder because it was procedural, not emotional. At the hospital lane, security asked Ms. Calloway to move. She reportedly told them, quote, "I'll be out when I'm out." Vanessa whispered, "I was on the phone." Judge Caprio replied, "Exactly." There are moments in court when a judge doesn't need to raise his voice because the truth has already done it for him. This was one of those moments. But the next revelation came from a part of the file nobody had discussed yet, and it posed a new question. Was Vanessa just rude and reckless, or had she tried to manipulate the court afterward? Judge Caprio picked up Vanessa's affidavit again. "You also state that your stop in the school zone was due to a medical urgency involving your father." "Yes." "What was the urgency?" Vanessa swallowed hard. "My father, Richard Calloway, is 68, early-onset Parkinson's. He had left his apartment without answering his phone. My daughter texted that she couldn't find her inhaler. My store manager was calling me because a delivery truck had hit our loading gate. Everything was happening at once." That was the first real, human flood of details we had heard from her all morning. And because it was specific, it rang truer than anything she had said before. Judge Caprio listened. So did the room. Then he asked the question that cut through all of it. "And in the idle of all that, why were you shopping at St. Clair Pharmacy on Hope Street at 7:52? Vanessa froze. Martha Bell looked up. Officer Ruiz flipped a page. The courtroom stared. Because that location was neither the school, nor the hospital, nor her father's apartment. Vanessa's lips parted. Judge Caprio held up a receipt. "The pharmacist's timestamp is in the supplemental packet." There it was. Another twist. Another crack in the story. And suddenly her explanation, which had just begun to earn some fragile empathy, was in danger again. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever watched someone get one chance to come clean and almost waste it. Vanessa's confidence was gone now. What remained was worse. A person cornered by facts and ashamed that the last place left to hide was inside a partial truth. She pressed her fingers to her temple. "I had stopped for my father's medication. That's where I was going after the school." Judge Caprio didn't move. "Then why leave that out?" "Because it sounds bad." He let the answer hang there. It did sound bad. But half-truths always sound worse once they are caught. Officer Ruiz spoke again. "The pharmacy receipt shows pickup of carbidopa-levodopa and blood pressure medication at 7:52. There is also a surveillance note from the pharmacy manager stating Ms. Calloway entered visibly upset, complained about being delayed by idiots at the school, and left 2 minutes later." Vanessa shut her eyes. That was the emotional breakdown building. Not tears yet. Just collapse of posture. She no longer stood above the case. She was inside it now. Judge Caprio spoke gently, which somehow made it sting more. "Ms. Calloway pressure explains a lot. It does not excuse disdain." Quote number 4. People wrote that one down later. You could feel it. But if you thought this was the point where Vanessa finally stopped resisting, you'd be wrong. Because shame often produces one last flare of defensiveness before it gives way. And Vanessa had one more. She lifted her head, eyes wet but angry. "Fine, I was awful. I said ugly things. I was stressed and selfish and in the wrong place twice. But people in this room are acting like I woke up wanting to hurt someone. I didn't. I did everything for everyone that day. My father, my daughter, my business. I am the person who handles everything. And one day I snapped for 3 minutes and now I'm the devil." It was the first honest-sounding thing she had said, and that made it dangerous, because honest pain can make even guilty people persuasive. The room shifted again. Not toward absolution. Toward complexity. Martha Bell watched her with an expression that was no longer purely anger. Darnell Brooks looked tired, not triumphant. Patrice Thompson lowered her gaze. This was the empathy turn beginning to form. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. Now we're finally somewhere useful. Vanessa looked up, surprised. He continued, no one here said you woke up wanting to hurt someone. What they're saying is you moved through the morning as if other people's safety was negotiable. That is the part you still don't fully understand. Then he reached for something in the file that had not yet been mentioned. A handwritten note. Folded once. Cream paper. Judge Caprio read the name at the top and looked to the back row. Is Chloe Calloway in the courtroom? Every head turned. A teenage girl in a Navy school cardigan stood slowly from the last bench beside an older woman with silver hair and a worried face. Chloe was 14, maybe 15 on a tired day, with her mother's cheekbones and none of her mother's armor. Vanessa whipped around. Chloe, what are you doing here? The girl's hands were shaking. I asked Nana to bring me. Vanessa's face went white. And just like that, the case stopped being only about the morning outside a school. Now it was about who had witnessed the woman behind the wheel long before the court ever did. This was the choice moment. Let the teenager speak and risk everything changing. Or shut it down and prove the court had been right about control all along. Judge Caprio looked at Vanessa. Your daughter submitted a letter. Do you object to my reading it? Vanessa was breathing harder now. Not angry. Afraid. Real fear. The kind that doesn't care about fines or citations anymore. It only cares that someone who loves you might describe you accurately in public. Her voice broke around the edges. If it's about me as a mother. Judge Caprio interrupted with unusual firmness. This court is not interested in humiliating you. It is interested in truth. Then he looked at Chloe. Did you write this voluntarily? Yes, sir. Did anyone pressure you? No, sir. He turned back to Vanessa. I'll read only what is relevant to state of mind and circumstances. Vanessa sat down slowly. And everyone in that room knew they had crossed into a different kind of hearing now. Like this video, if you believe the most powerful evidence is sometimes the 1W. Written by someone who still wants you to become better. Judge Caprio unfolded the letter. The paper made that tiny crackle papers make in quiet rooms. Then he began. Dear Judge Caprio, my name is Chloe Calloway. I know my mom can come off rude when she is scared. Most people only see the rude part. I am not writing this to excuse what she did because she was wrong. I'm writing because when my mom feels like she is failing everyone, she gets sharp and loud and acts like nobody can tell her anything. Vanessa's head dropped. The room stayed utterly still. Judge Caprio continued. My grandfather has been getting worse. He forgets where he put things and sometimes thinks he still has to go to work. My mom has been paying for a home aide we can barely afford because she doesn't want him in a facility. My dad moved to Florida 2 years ago and sends excuses more than child support. My mom works all day, takes calls all night, and hasn't slept a full night in months. A few people in the gallery exchanged looks. Not sympathy exactly. Recognition. How many people become unbearable because they have confused carrying too much with permission to crush whoever is nearby? Judge Caprio read on. The problem is, when she is overwhelmed, she acts like her emergency is bigger than everyone else's. I hate that about that morning because I know she probably thought she was just trying to survive the day. But other people were trying to survive their day too. There it was. The line that pierced the room. Even Judge Caprio paused after that one. Other people were trying to survive their day too. Quote number 5, though it came from a 14-year-old. Vanessa was crying now, silently, shoulders trembling once then again. Judge Caprio lowered the letter. "Ms. Calloway, your daughter may be the clearest witness in this courtroom." Vanessa covered her face. Chloe was crying too, but standing straight, as if she had decided that if this was the day truth happened, she would not flinch from helping it happen. Martha Bell reached into her bag and pulled out a tissue, then handed it backward to Chloe without a word. That tiny gesture transformed the room more than any speech could have. From outrage to empathy, from spectatorship to shared humanity. But the biggest moment still had not arrived. Because Vanessa, shaken and exposed and cornered by her own child's honesty, did what people often do when they are 2 inches from surrender. She tried one last time to control the narrative. She looked up through tears and said, "Your Honor, with respect, my daughter doesn't understand the pressure I'm under. Nobody does. I was doing everything. I was trying to hold my family together. I don't deserve to be destroyed over one terrible morning." Judge Caprio opened his mouth to respond. But Vanessa kept going. "I didn't ask for my father to get sick. I didn't ask for my husband to leave. I didn't ask to raise a teenager alone while keeping a business alive. So yes, maybe I was short. Maybe I was mean. But I'm still here doing all of it while everybody else gets to sit in judgment." She was crying harder now, and for one brief second the room almost moved with her. Almost. Then Officer Ruiz quietly said, "Your Honor, there is one additional audio segment from the school camera." Vanessa stopped. Judge Caprio turned. "What does it capture?" "Eliminates the need to guess what Ms. Bell and the child heard." The room tightened. A final piece. A final reveal. And this one would either humanize Vanessa further or strip away the last shelter left to her. Judge Caprio looked at Vanessa, and his face changed. Still calm. Still controlled. But now there was steel in it. "Ms. Calloway," he said, "for the next 10 seconds I need something from you." She nodded through tears. "Okay." Silence. The word hit the room like a gavel. Not loud. Absolute. "For 10 seconds, he continued. "You do not need to explain, defend, interrupt, reframe, or rescue yourself. Let the truth speak without competition." That was the line. The 10-second silence. The moment that would go viral. The moment people would replay, caption, quote, and send to friends with messages like, "This judge just said what half the world needs to hear." Vanessa's mouth closed. The room held its breath. Sergeant Morty played the audio. The school camera had no image now, only sound synced to the timestamp. Children chatting. A car horn. Officer Ruiz's instruction to move. Martha's whistle. Then Vanessa's voice, sharp and dismissive. "Move around me. I'm not made of magic." A child asked, very small, "Miss Martha, is she mad?" Then the scrape, the fall, the frightened cry. And after that, crystal clear, Vanessa saying, "If people can't walk around a car, that's their problem." No one moved. No one whispered. No one breathed loud enough to hear. Vanessa's face collapsed. Not composed crying. Not elegant tears. Collapsed. The kind of breakdown that starts when a person hears themselves way everyone else heard them all along. She bent forward, elbows on the table, both hands over her face. "I didn't remember saying that," she whispered. Judge Caprio's answer was soft. "That is often how cruelty works. It feels casual to the person delivering it and unforgettable to the person receiving it." The words hit every person in that room. Even Sergeant Morty looked away. Patrice Thompson wiped both eyes now. Darnell Brooks stared at the floor with his jaw clenched. Martha Bell didn't look angry anymore. She looked sad. And that sadness was worse. Because anger still centers the offender. Sadness centers the damage. If this moment hit you, like the video, and tell us the exact line you think changed Vanessa forever. Vanessa lifted her head slowly. Mascara had smudged beneath both eyes. Her voice was hoarse, stripped of sharpness. I was horrible. No one interrupted. She turned toward Martha first. Ms. Bell, I am so sorry. I saw you fall and I still drove away. I was embarrassed and angry and thinking only about myself. Then to Darnell. Mr. Brooks, I made your life harder because I didn't want to stop and deal with what I caused. Then astonishingly to Officer Ruiz. And officer, I talked to you like you were beneath me. You were doing your job, and I made that moment uglier because I thought being stressed gave me permission. Officer Ruiz nodded once. Nothing theatrical. Just acknowledgement. Then Vanessa looked toward Patris Thompson. And to that mother and that little boy, if there is any way to pass this message to them, tell them I am ashamed that my selfishness got anywhere near their fear. It was a full apology. Not perfect. Not polished. Real. And real apologies change rooms. Judge Caprio let the moment breathe. Then he asked the only question that mattered now. What are you going to do with this? Vanessa blinked. Whatever the court orders. He shook his head slightly. That's compliance. I'm asking about character. That line mattered because it forced the case beyond punishment. Vanessa sat very still. Then she said something nobody expected. I don't know yet, but I know I can't keep walking around like everybody else exists to absorb my bad days. That was the breakthrough. It wasn't eloquent. It wasn't crafted. It was true. And sometimes truth sounds less like a speech and more like a sentence that embarrasses the speaker while freeing them. But just when it seemed the case had reached its emotional peak, the unexpected twist arrived from the least likely person in the room. Martha Bell raised her hand slightly. Judge Caprio nodded. Yes, Ms. Bell. She stood carefully, favoring her wrist. I would like to say something before you sentence her. Vanessa stared at her, horrified and grateful at once. Martha turned toward the bench, then toward Vanessa. When I fell, I was furious. I'm not gonna pretend otherwise. I've stood in that crosswalk 9 years. I know what drivers are like when they think 2 minutes belongs to them more than children do. I thought she was exactly that kind of person. She paused. The entire room listened. Then I heard her daughter's letter, and I heard Ms. Calloway finally tell the truth, not the polished truth, the ashamed truth. Martha tightened her hand around the edge of the witness stand. Your Honor, I don't want her let off, but I don't want her crushed either. Vanessa began crying again. Martha continued. Pain should teach. It should not always destroy. If she means what she just said, then make her fix something. Make her look people in the eye. Make her use those fancy shoes to stand where regular people stand. A ripple of soft laughter moved through the courtroom. Even Judge Caprio smiled at that. Martha's expression softened. I don't need her in jail, I need her changed. There it was. The forgiveness twist. Not cheap mercy. Not naive forgiveness. A wiser kind. The kind that insists on consequence, while refusing to surrender another human being to their worst moment. And if you've ever seen compassion land harder than punishment, you know why this part made so many viewers emotional. Share this with someone who believes accountability and mercy can exist in the same room. Darnell Brooks then stood too. Your Honor, I agree with Ms. Bell. I want my deductible paid. I want the record to show what happened. But if she's really gonna own it, then maybe community work hits harder than a check. Let her come to school pickup one morning and see what we deal with. That drew a few nods from parents in the gallery. Patris Thompson added quietly, and have her sit in pediatric intake one afternoon. Vanessa looked at each of them as if she had no language left. Judge Caprio folded his hands and sat back. This was the moment every courtroom drama lives or dies on. Not the exposure. The response to exposure. Would justice become humiliation? Would mercy erase accountability? Would the judge play to the room? He did none of those things. Age. He did what made him formidable. He thought. Then he spoke. Ms. Calloway, your conduct that morning was reckless, arrogant, dismissive, and harmful. Not because you intended catastrophe, but because you granted yourself privileges other people did not have. You blocked a crosswalk. You contributed to a collision. You demeaned an officer. You left after a fall. Later that morning, you obstructed a hospital intake lane. Then you came into this courtroom prepared to minimize all of it. Every word landed where it belonged. No excess. No wasted drama. Then he continued. But I also heard something important today. I heard the difference between excuse and explanation. Your life is difficult. Your father is ill. Your daughter has watched you carry more than one person should. Your business is under strain. None of that excuses what happened. But if handled honestly, it may help explain how someone can become so consumed by private pressure that public decency starts to erode. Vanessa nodded, tears dropping straight down onto the table. Judge Caprio went on. This court does not function to satisfy outrage. It functions to restore order, enforce responsibility, and, where possible, return people better than they arrived. That line should have been carved into wood. The room felt it. He looked down at the file. On the school zone citation, I find the violation proved. On the failure to yield and unsafe lane movement, proved. On the disorderly conduct toward an officer, proved. On the false affidavit issue, I am choosing not to pursue a separate contempt finding today because I believe the truth finally arrived before I needed to. Vanessa let out a shaking breath. But Judge Caprio was not finished. You will pay restitution in full to Mr. Brooks for his deductible and documented expenses within 30 days. You will pay the statutory fines attached to these violations. You will complete a certified defensive driving course within 60 days. You will perform 40 hours of community service, but not generic community service. The room leaned in. You will complete 20 of those hours assisting arrival and dismissal logistics at Nathaniel Green Elementary under supervision. You will complete 10 hours volunteering through pedestrian safety outreach for seniors. And you will complete 10 hours in family intake support coordination at a pediatric care facility approved by the court. Vanessa cried openly now. Not because the sentence was crushing. Because it fit. He continued, you will also write letters of apology, one each to Ms. Bell, Mr. Brooks, Officer Ruiz, and the family of young Malik Thompson. Not because letters erase harm, because writing forces the hand to move at the speed of conscience. There was an audible murmur of approval. Judge Caprio lifted one final finger. And if you complete all of that, provide proof, and stay violation-free for 6 months, I will consider reducing the financial penalties on review. That is the court's path to redemption. Whether you walk it is up to you. Vanessa stood on unsteady legs. I will. Judge Caprio's gaze held hers. Not because you're embarrassed. No, sir. Not because this video may travel far beyond this room. She swallowed, no, sir. Why then? And her answer was the truest thing she said all morning. Because my daughter was right. Other people were trying to survive their day too. The gallery exhaled as one body. That was the justice-served satisfaction moment, but not the loud kind. The clean kind. The kind rooted in recognition, consequence, and a real chance to do better. If you believe that was the perfect sentence, like this video right now. Judge Caprio nodded once. Good, then don't make this courtroom your best day, make it your turning point. Case closed. But the story did not end there. Because the next part is why people kept talking about this hearing for months. Not because a rich, arrogant woman got humbled on camera. Because she did something rare after being humbled. She followed through. 2 weeks later, a sealed packet arrived at the clerk's office with the return address of Ivory and Ash on Wickenden Street. Inside were the first 4 apology letters, copies of her defensive driving enrollment, proof of a cashier's check to Darnell Brooks for $1,218 covering the deductible and missed work, and a handwritten note to the court. It read, "I used to think being overwhelmed was evidence that I mattered more than other people in the room. I no longer think that. I am beginning to understand that pressure reveals character, and mine needed rebuilding." Angela DeLuca remembered that line because she read hundreds of filings a week, and almost none of them sounded like a person putting their ego on paper and asking it to shrink. Then came the first-time jump that proved this wasn't performative. 3 weeks after sentencing, Vanessa showed up at Nathaniel Green Elementary at 7:05 a.m. in plain S. Sneakers, navy rain jacket, hair tied back, no designer sunglasses, no SUV idling in the lane. She stood beside the same curb she had blocked and watched what Martha Bell had watched for 9 years. Children distracted by shoelaces, buses too wide for comfort, hurried parents double parking, impatient drivers inching forward as if 7 seconds could save a whole morning. Martha was there. So was Officer Ruiz on one of the assigned safety mornings. No cameras. No viral audience. Just cold air and fluorescent crossing vests. Vanessa's first assignment was to carry the folding signs from the storage closet to the curb and help hold children at the sidewalk edge until the way was clear. It sounds simple until you're responsible for little bodies trusting your hand. At 7:42, a white SUV rolled up too close to the crosswalk. Vanessa stepped forward and raised her palm. The driver frowned. For a fraction of a second, she saw her old self in his impatience. Martha later said that was the exact moment she knew the sentence had landed. Because Vanessa didn't wave him through, didn't apologize for stopping him, didn't shrink. She held her ground and protected the crossing. At the pediatric facility, the transformation cut deeper. Patrice Thompson supervised 2 of her intake support hours personally. Vanessa wasn't allowed near clinical decisions. She was there to move forms, direct families, carry bottled water, and quietly witness waiting room panic without centering herself inside it. One afternoon, a mother paced while her toddler wheezed through a nebulizer mask. Vanessa asked where the extra blankets were. Not in the chirpy, managerial tone she used at her boutique. Softly, she brought one over and tucked it around the child's legs. The mother never knew who she was. That mattered too. Real change often happens where no audience is present. By month 2, the school principal, Mark Delaney, sent a short report to the court. Ms. Calloway has been punctual, respectful, and attentive. On October 31, she intervened to stop a parent from unloading in the bus-only lane and de-escalated the encounter without argument. Several staff noted her seriousness. Mrs. Bell reports she has been especially kind to younger children. Then came the letter nobody saw coming. It was from Darnell Brooks. He wrote on lined paper torn from a legal pad. "Your Honor, I received my reimbursement. I also received a note from Ms. Calloway with a sincere apology and a gift card to a local auto detail shop, which I did not ask for. More important, she came to school one morning and apologized to my niece Kiara for scaring her that day. My niece told me she sounded different than before. I thought the court should know that." That one sentence carried weight. She sounded different than before. Not looked different. Not dressed different. Sounded different. A deeper change. And then, around the 3rd month, The moment arrived that sealed the case in community memory. Martha Bell slipped on wet leaves near the school entrance during a drizzly Monday arrival. It wasn't a dramatic fall, but enough to twist her knee and send her handbag flying. Before anyone else got there, Vanessa was the one who caught her under the arms, steadied her, gathered the scattered items from the sidewalk, and knelt in the rain in those same once fancy shoes to check if her brace had shifted. Martha later joked, "That woman who said people can walk around a car practically carried me like I was made of glass." They laughed together when she said it. That laugh mattered more than viewers at home might realize, because it did not erase the old wound. It proved the wound no longer defined the relationship. If this part got to you, drop a comment telling us whether redemption feels more real when it costs someone time instead of just money. In January 2026, 6 months after the hearing, Vanessa returned to court for compliance review. The room was smaller that day, less crowded, but still attentive because word about the earlier hearing had spread through Providence, through courthouse hallways, through school pickup lines, through group chats, through social feeds where clipped courtroom moments become symbols for entire conversations about entitlement, parenting, stress, and grace. Vanessa walked in wearing a charcoal sweater dress, low black flats, and no visible armor. No performance. No trench coat. No designer heels announcing her arrival. Chloe sat behind her, smiling nervously. Martha Bell was there too, wrist-heeled, cane only for long distances now. Darnell Brooks showed up straight from work in a maintenance jacket. Officer Ruiz stood near the wall, as composed as ever. Patris Thompson came on her lunch break. Even Principal Delaney submitted an updated letter. Judge Caprio reviewed the file, proof of completed service hours, defensive driving certificate, restitution paid, letters sent, no new violations, positive reports from every placement. Then he looked at Vanessa and said, "How has the last 6 months changed you?" She didn't rush the answer. "That morning used to feel like the day everybody turned against me," she said. "Now it feels like the day I ran out of excuses. I used to believe responsibility meant carrying everything. I see now that real responsibility includes how safe other people feel around you." He nodded. She continued, "I still get overwhelmed. My father is still sick. My business is still hard. My daughter still needs me. But now when I feel that panic rise, I hear your voice telling me to be silent long enough for the truth to speak. Usually the truth is that I'm not the only person having a hard day." The room was so quiet you could hear the ventilation system. Judge Caprio smiled gently. "That is a better use of a courtroom than most people imagine." Then Chloe raised her hand shyly. The judge allowed it. She stood and read a short update from an index card. "My mom is not perfect now. She still gets stressed, but she says sorry faster. She leaves earlier. She doesn't yell at people in parking lots." And she put a sticky note on our dashboard that says, "Other people are trying to survive their day too." Even Officer Ruiz smiled at that. Judge Caprio looked at Vanessa for a long moment, then reduced a portion of the financial penalties as promised and ended the review with one final remark. "Ms. Calloway, the law can punish behavior. It takes character to build a different life afterward. Keep building." That should have been the epilogue. For most stories, it would have been. But one final layer made this case unforgettable. A month later, the court received a thick envelope postmarked Barrington. Inside were photos from a newly painted pedestrian safety fundraiser outside Nathaniel Green Elementary. Vanessa had organized it through her boutique, partnering with local businesses to sponsor reflective gear, school crossing signs, and inhaler pouches for families dealing with asthma. There was a photo of Martha Bell laughing beside a folding table, one of Darnell Brooks helping unload boxes, Officer Ruiz speaking to parents about school zone rules, Chloe handing out bright orange wristbands that read, "Slow down. Someone's whole day is crossing here." and beneath the photos was a final letter, written not by Vanessa, but by Martha. "Dear Judge," it began, "I thought I wanted to see that woman embarrassed. Turns out what I really wanted was to know she could become the kind of person I'd trust near a child. I do now." That may have been the most powerful sentence in the entire saga. Because trust is harder to earn than forgiveness. Embarrassment is easy. Transformation is expensive. The letter went on. "She cannot undo the morning she hurt us. None of us can. But she has stood in the rain, listened to frightened parents, carried signs, admitted fault, and made herself useful where she once made herself a problem. At my age, you learn to tell the difference between a public apology and a changed habit. She has changed habits." Judge Caprio reportedly kept that letter longer than most correspondents. Not because it flattered the court. Because it captured something rare, justice that didn't stop at winning. Viewers who later heard the full story always talked about the 10-second silence. The line was too good not to repeat. For 10 seconds silence. Let the truth speak without competition. People put it on captions, clips, reposts, reaction videos. Millions would watch that moment and feel the snap of authority meeting arrogance with absolute composure. But the ones who really understood the case remembered a different line. Other people were trying to survive their day too. That was the deeper lesson. Not only for Vanessa. For everybody. For the driver leaning on a horn. For the person double parking just for a second. For the parent unloading where they shouldn't. For the customer barking at a cashier. For the son stressed about bills. For the nurse sprinting through another impossible shift. For the officer repeating instructions to someone who thinks rules are optional. For the volunteer in the crosswalk who still shows up in freezing rain because children need one adult between them and hurry. Courtroom stories go viral because people love to see arrogance punctured. That's honest. There is schadenfreude in it. We feel satisfaction when someone smug gets exposed. But the stories that live longer, the ones people come back to months later, are the ones where justice does more than humiliate. It reveals. It interrupts a pattern. It offers a door. And then somehow someone walks through it. Vanessa Calloway did not become a saint. That would make the story fake. What happened was more believable and therefore more moving. She became aware. She became interruptible. She became capable of shame without turning it into self-pity. She became the kind of person who arrived 15 minutes early because she had learned what a minute could cost somebody else. At Ivory and Ash, customers later noticed a framed card near the register. It wasn't branded. It wasn't cute. Just a plain cream card in black script. Pressure explains a lot. It does not excuse disdain. Underneath it, smaller, "Please be kind. Everyone here is carrying something." Some customers never knew where the quote came from. Those who did never forgot. Darnell Brooks eventually used part of the reimbursement relief to fix his Camry and still jokes that the old car became the most expensive witness in Providence. Chloe kept the dashboard sticky note even after the ink faded and replaced it with a laminated card. Patris Thompson said one volunteer shift from Vanessa turned into a quarterly donation program for pediatric families needing gas vouchers and inhaler spacers. Officer Ruiz, asked about the case months later, put it in the plainest terms possible. "Most people say sorry when consequences arrive. She eventually said sorry when understanding arrived. That's different." And Martha Bell, asked by a local parent why she had shown mercy, gave the wisest answer of all. If the court had only punished her, she would have gone home feeling attacked. Because it forced her to see, then serve, she went home changed. That is what made this case better than a clip. It became a mirror. For stress. For entitlement. for parenthood, for burnout, for the little daily choices by which decent people slowly become harsh if no one stops them in time. And yes, it also became one of those moments where a calm judge absolutely silenced arrogance in 10 unforgettable seconds. But the silence was never the whole point. The point was what finally got heard after the noise stopped. If you made it this far, drop a comment telling us this. Do you think people like Vanessa deserve a second chance once they truly face what they've done? Or are some moments too revealing to forgive? Like this video if you believe accountability should teach, not just punish. Hit that subscribe button if you want more courtroom stories, where justice has backbone and compassion. And share this with someone who needs the reminder that your worst day does not have to become your whole identity, but it does have to become your responsibility. Because in the next story, we're looking at a father who laughed at a small fine until one witness stood up and changed the entire courtroom in 30 seconds. You do not want to miss that one. Until then, remember this. The strongest people in the room are not always the loudest. Sometimes they are the ones quiet enough to hear the truth, brave enough to accept it, and disciplined enough to become different after it speaks.